Good morning. Happy Thursday. How are you doing today? It's so happy to see you. Well, I wish I could really see you. I miss you so much. We're moving on to Lewis and Clark, A Prairie Dog for President. It's by Shirley Ray Redmond, illustrated by John Manders. Remember, we read part of it yesterday where Lewis and Clark were sent by Thomas Jefferson, number 3 president, to explore a part of our country. And they were trying to find they were exploring, and they were choosing animals to send back to the president, parts of plants, just anything they could think of. They wanted to send big animals. They couldn't send a bison. They couldn't send a grizzly bear, too dangerous, too big, jackrabbits were too fast. That's what we read yesterday. Now let's read on. One day, Lewis and Clark came to a prairie. Now, prairie is ground that doesn't have anything on it. Maybe some weeds or wildflowers or something. No buildings or anything. The ground was filled with holes. A little animal sat by each hole. "What are those?" asked Lewis. Just then a hawk flew overhead. The little animals barked. Then they dived into their holes. "Let's catch some of those rascals," Clark said. "They're small enough to send to the president." The soldiers took shovels and picks, and they dug and they dug, but the little animals were too fast. "Let's flood them out," Lewis said, and men carried water from the river. Loris poured the water into a hole, and Clark and the soldiers waited beside other holes. Interesting. They waited and waited and waited, and one of the animals popped up. "I've got it," said Clark. There he is. He caught it. Clark put the animal in a cage. "Wonder what it is," he said. Lewis laughed. "It's a wet rodent." "Well, you can call it a ground rat." "No," said Clark. "It looks like a squirrel. I'll call it a barking squirrel." "Squirrels don't bark," said a soldier. "Dogs bark. We should call it a prairie dog." "That's it." Lewis and Clark agreed. Lewis and Clark picked a scout to take the prairie dog to the president. Clark also gave the scout some birds to take. They were called magpies. Lewis gave the scout a letter for the president. He gave him plants that he had collected. Soldiers gave him bison skins and deer horns. "Have a nice trip," said Lewis and Clark. There he goes. The scout and the animals rode a barge down the river. They boarded a big ship in New Orleans. The ship sailed around Florida, and it sailed north to Baltimore, Maryland. Finally, the ship landed in Baltimore. Now, Baltimore is just a little bit ways from Washington, D.C. Can you tell? There we go. Pretty close. If you ride from a train from Washington to Baltimore or the other way around, it takes a long time, like 2 hours or something. But really, it's a pretty short distance. There you go. Of course, they didn't have trains back then. Now, let's talk about what we learned yesterday. So you know that America, when we first started out, very small, 13 colonies. They weren't even states yet, remember? And we grew into a much bigger country when we bought land from France. Remember, Daniel Boone and other settlers moved west from the Appalachian Mountains. This orange is the Appalachian Mountains. Remember, they moved west. Now, remember the the Native Americans were already living here. They had been for a long, long time, thousands of years. Now, when these groups of people living together became colonies, first they were settlements where people were just kind of settling, getting together. They became colonies. Those Native Americans were pushed out of their land. They were forced to move. And they were forced to move over the mountains. Now remember, Daniel Boone helped create the Wilderness Road, and that gave away a much easier way for people to get across the mountains. Remember, Thomas Jefferson wanted to purchase, remember what he wanted to buy? A city. Can you imagine buying a city? It sounds so strange to us today, doesn't it? But that's exactly what he wanted to do. He wanted to buy New Orleans. And it is down here at the end of the Mississippi River, this pencil line right here, all the way down, that's Mississippi River. He bought that from France, from Napoleon, who was the leader of France at that time. He wanted to buy the river. Why? Do you remember? For travel and trade. Remember, people could go up and down the river with the stuff they wanted to sell or trade. And it's a big river. Now, in between the Appalachian Mountains and this big part that I've circled, those are the Rocky Mountains. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful Rocky Mountains. Okay. It does land in between there, which it does include Oklahoma. You see, I'm looking at this backward. There's Oklahoma. There we go. There's Oklahoma. It includes Oklahoma, doesn't it? So remember, west, here's the Mississippi River. West of the Mississippi River is what we're talking about. So remember, at that time, it was called the Louisiana Territory. And once we bought it, once a country bought it, it was called the Louisiana Purchase. And today in our read aloud, guess what we're talking about? Lewis and Clark. I'm wondering what more we can learn about, right? So very, very, very interesting to me. I love history, and I hope you do too. I love you, and I will see you later. Bye.